Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto Manga chapter review. This one's going to be for chapter 42, which is called Regeneration. For anyone wondering, the chapter is out now officially for free. Of course, you can read this on viz.com or Manga Plus. It's there for free officially if you're wondering where the chapter is. Yeah, so overall, what are my thoughts on chapter 42? Once again, the thoughts that sort of dominate my mind in the aftermath of reading this is just that I really continue to not particularly enjoy the pacing of how this manga does these kind of longer fight scenes, and that this is now, the third chapter of this fight, and it just feels like in the amount of pages that we've had, like about 120 pages or so, over these three chapters, it feels like we've barely done anything. Yes, there's been a plot, some figuring out involved in all of this, but over the course of 120 pages, you expect more to happen. And I think this is just sort of the Boruto manga and its biggest problems in so many ways. And this chapter, I think, really represents that of, like, we felt like we were finally going to, like, do something in this chapter, but then by the end of it, it's like, what are the takeaways? It's like, I'd say about 2-3 pages of this chapter overall has sort of meaningful content in it, and the rest really does just feel sort of like fight. Just fill up the pages with the characters fighting. Yes, they're doing their jutsus and stuff like that, but it is just fighting to fill up the pages, and it doesn't really feel like there's that much of an attempt from the author here to really use the fact that they have like 40 pages and fill those 40 pages with content. And that, like, the cliffhanger ending once again, and this is the exact same as I think last week's chapter, of just like, is the cliffhanger of Sarada using the Chidori and seemingly finishing the fight a good enough cliffhanger to end up a chapter on? Like, I suppose this is a better cliffhanger than last week's chapter, and that last week's chapter of just, Boro is going for the jar, the sealing vessel that Naruto is in. Ooh, cliffhanger, even though he'd already done it already in the fight. Like, this still, I don't think, was quite on that level, in that in many ways, if this manga was better paced, the Chidori would have happened halfway through this chapter, and we probably could have got the resolution to this fight within this chapter. But because of the style that this manga tends to have in these moments, we get just a lot of, wasting pages, big giant panels kind of that don't really cover anything. And it's frustrating. It's super frustrating to me that, like, we wait a month for a chapter, and then when it comes out, like, you read through it in like 2 minutes, and there's barely anything to discuss across like 40 pages. And it makes these kind of relatively big moments in the manga just not feel so great. And that when we get around to doing this in the anime, I think this is going to be a really good fight. It's just been a bit of a chore to get through, I think, in the manga, unfortunately. And the same goes for like some of the other fights. Like, I thought the Naruto Delta fight, when we got through that, took way too long to get through, like, with the format how it is. Like, I still overall like where we're heading and stuff like that, but we need to get back to the plot. Like, this is where, like, even next month's chapter is going to be very important, in that, like, please don't draw this fight out for another month. You've basically seemingly led off here on the idea that this is a quote-unquote finishing blow. You don't need to do another chapter of fighting. Just within the first quarter of the next chapter, you need to have the fight done and dusted and figure out, plot-wise, where we're going from here. We've defeated Boro. What do we do with the idea that we have the sealing jar that Naruto is in here, and we're stuck with the idea of how do we get back? Deal with those topics in the next chapter, and not have the whole thing do basically what this chapter does. But anyway, let's go through a page by page to really sort of highlight kind of where the strengths of the chapter are, but where the weaknesses are. So, of course, we have to recap where we were last time out. Boro is going for the jar to distract everyone. Kawaki is kind of rushing in to protect it, because obviously Boro basically hinted at the idea that if you try to destroy the sealing jar from the outside, it will basically destroy what's inside, so that will kill Naruto. So he rushes over to the jar, but instead of attacking it, he just unleashes his virus again. But then he also fires some shurikens at Kawaki. Kawaki goes to block it, but then it's revealed that the shurikens had like gunpowder on them, and so an explosion goes off, and Kawaki gets hit. But he has defended the jar, the sealing jar, from the explosion. And Boro is not very happy with this. He says, you've changed, Kawaki. It's truly sad to see. He doesn't like seeing Kawaki, care about other people, of course. He just wants to take him back and basically reprogram him in a way. We're going to have to retrain you from scratch when you get home. So the others do stand up for him, Boruto especially. Kawaki's a citizen of Konoha now. He ain't going back with any of you. Boro does again mention here, I'm going to take you along with me too, Karma Brat. So just acknowledging that he wants Boruto as well. So then we get some fighting here, and I think that these are the sections of the fight that I think could be made more interesting, or borderline, like, you don't need to have as many of these. Like, given what this chapter does in terms of the core elements of this section of the fight, I think you don't need to focus in on what is ultimately just two characters fighting Boro in the background to distract him while two other characters strategize. That's the problem with some of the pages here of like, Boruto goes in, punch, just standard punch, Boro blocks it. Mitsuki comes in, kick, he gets hit. Boruto comes in with the Rasengan. Boro blocks that with his hand, and his hand like explodes but immediately regenerates. Boruto gets hit and is sent flying. Mitsuki gets hit and is sent flying. And it's just like, we know this already. We know that when Boro is hit, he regenerates. Why did you need to have like 3-4 pages there with just like a sequence, like an eighth of the chapter basically just doing what we'd already done in the fight up to now? In that, like, that sequence is like 2 taijutsu moves and Boruto's, go-to attack. There's nothing particularly fancy in terms of what's going on. It's just proving everything we already knew. It's just not that great. Sarada charges in and says, she's thinking, this is probably the biggest strength of this chapter. I need to be careful about the gunpowder, no fire or lightning style jutsu. She throws some shuriken, but Boro just fires some lava style at it and burns those up. Mitsuki uses his kind of extendable arms here, wraps Boro up. This is when Kawaki comes in, fires his kind of laser from his hand and kind of blows Boro in half. And once again, Boro immediately regenerates, and because of this, like, all of his clothes have been blown off, so it's revealed that like he has this sort of like black markings all over his body, and these sort of clearly like tech kind of vents and ports all over his body as well. And it just gets across the idea that like, oh, he really is a monster because his body's been completely like morphed by ninja tech. So this is where Kawaki asks for some time to plan something, and again we have Mitsuki and Boruto just playing the role in this chapter of filler fighting basically, while he gets to strategize with Sarada. So he uses shadow doppelgangers again. Like, I haven't had a chance to really say this, but like, I really do dislike the idea that they've just continued with the official translation that shadow clones is shadow doppelgangers, in that like no one in the fandom I think ever calls clones doppelgangers. It's just, it's the one thing with like Viz that I don't particularly like. It's the same thing with like in One Piece, that like Zoro is Zolo still, just because they have to keep it consistent with an early sort of translation choice before it was eventually revealed what it is. And it's the same thing here, but it's not too big of a problem. So this is where Kawaki goes over to Sarada and just says, there is a way of neutralizing the regeneration ability that he has. So while again Mitsuki and Boruto are handling Boro here, Kawaki explains, all members of Kara have had their bodies remodeled by this guy named Amado. We of course know him, including me. Amado's a genius, but even his technical skills have a limit. That's the key. The ability to instantly regenerate one's head or torso is amazing, but the downside to scientific ninja tools is that the more powerful they are, the bigger they've got to be. There has to be a core, at least the size of a heart, somewhere inside him. And so this is the key to defeating Boro, is that he has this scientific ninja tool that is helping him with the regeneration, and if they can take that out, they can take him out overall. So that's like the key thing. Like that one page, which has like the most dialogue on any page in the entire chapter, is probably the most important page in the chapter, because it's like one of the only pages where they actually do something more than just, basic kind of fighting. So Sarada says, if we destroy the core, we can take him down and he won't regenerate. And Kawaki says, I'll swear to it. That degree of regeneration is impossible without a giant core. That's Amado's shortcoming. It's just the issue of where the core might be. And they figure out, like, oh wait, over the course of this fight, we've already blown up his head, his upper body, and his lower body. Where is it? So they kind of figure out, oh, he's moving it around somewhere. You figure it out, Sarada, with your Sharingan. So this is where she turns on the Sharingan and watches him fight with Mitsuki and Boruto. And as they deliver another attack, Kawaki joins in. He uses his kind of energy kind of projection thing and blows his head off. And as she watches him do the thing, he's been doing that sort of hand sign whenever he's been able to predict where someone's going to hit him. She figures out that, oh, what that sign is doing is it's moving the core, the ninja tool core, around in his body so that it won't get destroyed along with the blast that's going to destroy part of his body. So once he keeps that out of the way, he'll be okay. So this is probably like the main, like, oh, that's a kind of clever kind of reveal of like, okay, ninja tools is like the core of their unique abilities as an organization, and it's moving around the body. Okay, that's cool. That's clever enough. Why did it take so long to figure this out? So yeah, that's what she figures out. Boruto, continues to go in with the Rasengans and stuff like that, but he does eventually say, that was my last Rasengan. I don't have enough chakra left for more. Everyone else is exhausted, so it's pretty much up to Sarada to do this. So she figures it out. Okay, he's moved the core to his right flank. That's where it is right now. And she's kind of just strategizing here. What do I do now? If I tell them, he'll immediately know we're strategizing to take out the core and he'll just move it. So she has to do this completely on her own. She's the only one who's figured it out, and by keeping that information to herself, she'll keep that information away from him, and she might be able to take him by surprise. So as the others are getting kind of bashed around, she kind of figures out, okay, what attack am I going to do as she charges in? The Fireball Jutsu or the Phoenix Blossom Jutsu can't penetrate his body, and just like the others, as soon as he sees me aiming for his flank, he'll move his core. He's too smart for me to spring a surprise attack on him, and she says, if only there is an attack that I knew that's faster than he can weave signs. And she was like, oh, there is. Just one, a jutsu that can pierce his core. Whether he notices my aim or not, because it's faster than weaving signs. A jutsu I'm still practicing. I haven't tested in real battle yet. I might not be able to pull it off, but I've got to try. So she charges up. It's clear from the setup panel here. She's going for the Chidori here. Boruto notices what it is, and he's like, old man Sasuke is Chidori. And she charges in. Boro notices she's too fast as he goes to do the hand sign, but at this point she's already committed to the attack. She says, Dad, lend me strength, and she seems to deliver the blow directly to his core, through his right flank. She just kind of cuts straight through him, and they leave it there. It's just, we end with that finishing kind of blow panel of Sarada delivering it. but it's right in the middle of it happening, so there's no real reaction to like, has it succeeded or not, and that's meant to be the cliffhanger. So that's the chapter. And I think you can see from the me talking through it there that the core of this chapter is basically that they fight Boro some more, and eventually Kawaki decides, oh, I should tell you, Sarada, there is a way to neutralize the regeneration ability. Here's how we do it. She uses her Sharingan, and as the others fight him, figures out where he's moved it, and uses it to Chidori. That's the plot of this chapter. Is that 40 pages worth of content? I don't think so in any way. So this was definitely a chapter that to me felt extremely light on content overall. And there was no particularly amazing like stuff to discuss here, in that, like I said, the main focus is like page 23, where Kawaki reveals the idea that like, oh, all of the members of Kara have had their bodies remodeled. That's an interesting piece of information. Amado has worked that scientific ninja tool magic on everyone, and that anyone who's got any like Kara member going into the future who has a regeneration ability is going to have some sort of a core that is allowing that to happen. So that's a nice reveal. But it's like it's one page over the course of like 40 in the chapter. And the rest of it is just sort of fairly standard fighting. Like, there's not a lot of particularly unique jutsu, and while they try to add a little bit of strategy to what's going on with like Boro with the gunpowder laced shurikens and a few little things like that, there's some kind of clever moves. It is let down by the fact that, you know, whenever they need to fill up content, they always just kind of revert to form of like, Boruto will make some shadow clones, they'll be taken out. He'll always go for the Rasengan. Like, there's no other jutsu really at play here. I think it's a great moment for Sarada. Like, over the course of this fight, we've seen her made into the team's leader and show that leadership potential in this fight by using a jutsu and seemingly having it work. Even though she was not particularly confident in it. So that's the main character sort of development I take away from this. The interesting stuff is obviously in the aftermath of the fight, because like, what value is there in the story basically to having this fight go on any longer than it already has? Boro is interesting enough, but the other Kara members, I think, are ultimately more interesting. So unless he's going to reveal some really interesting stuff to us coming up next, I'm kind of ready to sort of move on. Get back to the plot and really get to where we're going from here. We had some really great stuff like just before this fight started, and I'd like to sort of get back to that. And build up to some of our kind of bigger moments. I'd even like to see what's going back on in the Leaf Village with like Sasuke and him being healed by Sakura and so on. And those are the things I'm thinking about. And obviously, how do they get out of the dimension that they're in now? What happens to Naruto in the ceiling jar? Do they manage to get him back? Is he going to be locked in there for who knows how long? Like, is him being trapped here the exact same position that he's in the flash forward that we saw at the very start of the Boruto series? They're the questions we're trying to get to. So, you know, it's a solid chapter, but like, I think it's being incredibly generous to this chapter to call it anything particularly amazing, given the pacing of it, the amount of like depth and detail that's actually here, which I don't think is that much. To me, this is like a 6, maybe 6.5 out of 10 chapter, and I think that's being pretty generous to it. That it just, to me, doesn't have the overall content that's needed here. There's just not enough content for 40 pages in my mind, and I think this chapter is one of the biggest examples of this is your big problem with the Boruto manga. That if they could fix that up and just have a little bit more happen in every chapter, we'd be in such a better position. And so I'm just really trying to get across this idea that, look, I'm criticizing this month's chapter, but I'm also sort of constructively criticizing this chapter. That, you know, if we think this is one of the best chapters of Boruto ever, then, like, where have our standards fallen to, type thing. That, like, we need to ask and want better than this, while I still acknowledge overall the story's in a good position, because the potential when they get back to doing some more plot and character related stuff is very good, given where we are right now. It's just the second we jump into a fight, it just feels like we just revert to form and everything just slows to a crawl. Like this chapter, this fight has gone on for a quarter of a year. And if we get another chapter, this will be a third of a year's worth of chapters just on one fight. And is it worth that much time? That's the issue overall. So, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the chapter. Do you agree or disagree with me on my thoughts on this chapter? But yeah, they're my thoughts on chapter 42. Let me know what you think in the comments. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.